Kia ora. Welcome back to This Is Our Story. Welcome, Briar. Thank you for joining me once again. And thank you, all of you out there in the wide world, for joining us. Once again, congratulations for making it this far. And congratulations to you, Briar, because you know what? I'm proud of us. When you think, I mean, we haven't really talked about this so much so far, but the distance that we had in our brotherly sisterly relationship over the years, and to get to the point where we are now doing a podcast together would have been unimaginable.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. In fact, I don't think, when I mention it to people who have known us for a long time, I don't think they really believe it.
No. Talking weekly. Wow.
Yeah. Well, so hopefully you've been following the story so far, because if you haven't, it wouldn't really be making sense to kind of jump in, jump out of this, as it is very chronological. We have delved into the very early years. We kind of took it in chapters. So that there was the first chapter was probably the years between 1 and 10, when we were growing up in Kaikohe in the far north of New Zealand. And then the next chapter 2, was focusing more on the teenage years, which kind of put us more in that living on the farm stage and going to Christian school. And when we finished off, we were just about ready to finish school and then leave home. Well, at least I was anyway. So this chapter will be focusing more on those years, those first couple of years as we left, branched out. And in fact, this new chapter 3, is entitled Branching Out, getting out into the big, wide world as much as it could be in little New Zealand. But it was an interesting time. But before we get into that, as per usual, we will start off with story time. I feel like I'd like to introduce some kind of ethereal music in the background behind story time. But we're going to be focusing on something which briefly we mentioned at the end of our last episode. Very kind of important experience for both of us connected with school, called convention. Pretty amazing when I think about it, but also very weird. So I'll just briefly explain what convention was, and then we'll kind of dive into talking about some of our experiences. So as we have very well covered in previous episodes, we were both at a small Christian school, very small, but we had our own academic system and our own curriculum, and called ACE, Accelerated Christian Education, from the States. And there were various other schools around New Zealand who were also using the same curriculum, and as well there were a few bigger schools that also kind of did a little bit of ACE and a little bit of other stuff. They were called integrated schools. But once a year, basically all of the schools, they organized what was called convention, which was literally a convention of schools, and they would all come together, and sounds very commune-like.
and very nerdy.
Yeah, they would all come together and basically compete in different categories, like sport and artistic competitions. And
drama.
Yeah, drama.
Singing.
Yep. Yeah, it sounds like another world. It was like the Christian Olympics almost.
Pretty much.
Yep. Dedicated to the arts in broad terms.
It kind of had like camp feels, like school camp, but you kind of
very camp feel.
Yeah. It was exciting.
And we would come together for 1 week, once a year, and then basically compete against each other in the spirit of friendship and Christian community. But, like, as weird as it sounds now to talk about it, it was pretty awesome at the time for us, because we were from this little town and we got to meet people from all over New Zealand and just kind of get an idea about what it was like.
And we had to travel quite a distance to go to this too, wasn't it? Like, I don't know, like 6 hours or something.
Yeah, around about.
Yeah.
As previously mentioned in the last podcast, it was the site of Parachute Festival. So it was a it was actually a Christian campsite, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I don't have a huge amount of specific memories from that time, but it was a pretty big deal in our school calendar, and we would spend a lot of time preparing for it. I mean, what are your memories of? Because from Brian, what I remember from my time is the stress of preparing for convention.
Yeah, it was, and I think we had to pick at least one thing from each category, maybe, or there was like a certain amount of events that you had to enter to be able to go, I think. And I can't remember how many it was, but there was, like, I remember preparing, doing some art, and I've never been good at art, but I think it was one of those things that I was like, oh yeah, sweet, that'll be easy. I'll just enter in a picture, and I'm not going to get any prizes, but it'll get me there. And I remember my art teacher being really hard on me, like, do you think that's going to win anything at convention? And I'm like, like, what are you trying to say?
The art in particular, I found terribly stressful because I am miles away from any. Well, I've got no gifting in that area at all.
I used pastels and did a sunset picture. I remember vividly exactly what it looked like, and it was pretty basic, but I was like, I'm going to convention.
Well, because we if we didn't enter stuff, we weren't allowed to go.
Yeah.
So because like some who are better in sport, right, they would just do a few paltry pieces of art. I remember we'd choose these categories, but obviously we were all stronger in certain things, and then we'd just do kind of.
I remember doing a dramatic reading, so you had to read to a group of people, and the judges
were massive. Yeah. There were so many different things you could do.
But there was another
like monologues and dialogues, famous speeches, loads of stuff.
But those were the ones that you think, oh, yep, that's easy. That's just reading in front of people. Tick, like that's another category sorted.
Yeah, but I think there was a minimum of things you had to do.
Yeah, there was, but that's what I mean. You had to like, for instance, you were really sporty. You would choose all the sporty events, but then you had to find some other ones to join in. And the schedule throughout the week was quite tight too. So say at 10 you had dramatic reading, at 10:30 you had your choir singing, and then 11 might be volleyball kind of thing. So
it was a pretty full-on schedule, and we'd have like a bit of free time. So it was very camp-ish. But we all had to go in school uniform, of course, and we're just wandering around trying not to get uniforms dirty, but really wanting to go out and do some crazy shit because you're with all these people that we would see maybe once a year, and because people were at school and you'd see the same people every year, and you'd kind of have these kind
friendships.
Of de facto friendships. I think I remember staying in contact with these people that I met throughout the year. There was like sending letters and stuff.
I definitely did. I made really good friends with some people from another school, and I ended up going to visit them in Palmerston North and staying with them over the school holidays. So
yeah, I do remember
good friends.
Oh, I'll come back to that. But because it was a Christian camp, there was services like church services and kind of mini church services or devotional type things that would happen every day. You'd get up early, and then you'd all have your breakfast together with the shitty cold toast and baked beans and spaghetti, and God, it was awful. But it was all part of the the camp experience.
I actually really loved the meal times, like that gathering, and it was like, oh, who are we going to sit next to? Yeah. And this is probably where like all my major crushes kind of started at that age.
Yeah, I had one of those too.
When you're sort of 14, 15, and you're meeting all these other young people, and you feel ugly as fuck in your uniform, but you're like, do your hair up, and
you're all ugly together because there was some terrible uniforms. Yeah.
But then like, you take your friend, and you'd be like, where are we going to sit today? Like, let's sit opposite that school because they've got hot guys. Or so I loved those meal times because it meant we could all be together, so you could sort of scan the room.
There were also some very interesting characters. I don't know if you remember much about the homeschooling crowd.
Yes, but they were also very good at everything, like
so
their
good.
Sport and their choir, and like they were the ones.
I don't remember them being so good at sport, but they're all good at the really artistic stuff. Like, because I was the guy who was good at sport, the running and shot put and stuff, except for there was a 1 year that you beat me, and I could not cope with that. You beat me at shot put.
Yes, I did. I had a strong arm, remember?
Very strong.
I got my practice in on your arm.
Yep, lots of hammering. No, I remember. So I had so there was this one of the later years when I was one of the few older students. I had a crush on a girl who was also a similar age and who was also very good at everything.
Annoyingly
I don't
so.
remember her name, but I remember I went and visited her and her family. This is maybe like maybe this was the first year of uni actually, because we stayed kind of in contact. We must have written letters or something. Jesus, I don't know. I just remember that then, back in the day. I remember. I think she maybe sent me a letter. Anyway, I went and visited her family, and then I went with her and her family to their church, and they were kind of very strict in a strict Southern Baptist church, and that was a very interesting experience and explained a lot about their family because they were kind of very traditional. All women had long hair, wore long skirts, very, very prim and proper in the way they conducted themselves, very respectful. And I just remember the pastor yelling at children during the service because they were talking or being too noisy or something, and he yelled at them from the pulpit. Yeah, that was all very strange. I don't know if you have any other specific memories of convention. Oh yes, you know what? Sorry, I know you told me that I butt in, and I just can't stop myself. No, I have a very specific memory because I went back as a volunteer. Do you remember that?
Oh yes, when you'd finished school.
When I finished, yeah, God, this is how connected I was. How much I must have loved it. I didn't want to move on, and I went back as a kind of a first year uni student. I think it was first semester.
Yeah,
Went back as a volunteer, and it was so weird being there as not even a real adult, but kind of half adult, half child, and not really fitting in with all the teachers and stuff. It was very odd. But I remember taking it very seriously, and I remember I gave a talk because I used to enter all the singing competitions and convention and usually did relatively well. But there was one, I was giving a talk to everyone and I didn't really know what to say. They just wanted me to talk in like, okay, this is an example of a young man who's gone through Christian education and is now doing really well at university, and we want you to
and you're like,
basically encourage all these young people. I'm like, Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing. So I got it there and I didn't really know what to say, so I just ended up singing a song. I was like, so I've just prepared this song and I'll sing this, and just as an example of how convention has helped prepare me for being really comfortable, which is like, how weird is that? I'm singing because I'm not comfortable to speak, but don't worry, conventions made me comfortable enough to sing in front of people.
Great life skill.
Yeah, very practical.
If you're going to
just wander around just bursting into song.
Yeah, I mean, I remember because there was girls' dormitories and boys' dormitories, and we used to. Oh, that's right, because I made close friends with some girls from another school, and we used to sit out in sort of the centre court area and sing songs together, and they were amazing singers and felt really connected to them. But I'm pretty sure I remember wetting the bed there too.
I think I remember that.
And being absolutely humiliated. Oh my God. Must have been the nerves. But yeah, it was such a fantastic part of our year at school, because school was pretty shitty, to be honest. Like, we didn't have much going for our school, so this was kind
it was really
cool
boring at school. So this was definitely a
meet
highlight.
other people, and
it was also the time, like, because when we do our preparation the months beforehand, it was also a good opportunity to kind of hone your skills in certain areas. So we talked about writing stories a little while ago, and that was definitely something that every year I would enter a story. And that's also when we mentioned your friend who was also into writing stories. We would compare stories, and I remember her being very good and me being just having really great ideas, but just being really average at writing them down. But yeah, so we used to get these ribbons for the different categories, and you'd come away with all your ribbons, and me being the perfectionist, it would bother me for the longest time about how many ribbons I did and didn't get. I usually had a lot of ribbons in the musical category. I used to do, I did
Photography as
solos. I
well,
was in
we
the
did.
solo category, which was normally not many people were brave enough to do solo. So that I guess that was considering where I went with music throughout my life, I think this is obviously very important that I went through this particular thing. Yeah, it was, if I think about it, this kind of push to get better at these artistic type things was probably
Well,
quite instrumental in
that's probably where your creative side sort of really was
yeah, for
able to
sure. I
come out.
mean, you're creative or not, right? But it's all about how you hone those skills, and this was an opportunity for sure to do that.
Mm. And I remember, like, at the end of the week, we'd all be like devastated that we had to say goodbye to our friends that we only got to see once a year, and
Yeah,
we'd go around getting them to sign this book, or like, different people from different schools, like, sign here.
yeah, that's right.
um,
And I guess like nowadays people travel around all the time, and we don't really consider the fact that it just wasn't that normal back then, or at least for us, because we were so far away from the rest of New Zealand. We just didn't. People, when you're up there, you just don't really travel that much because it's such a logistical
and it's so
mission.
isolated up there, isn't it?
Yeah, and in the far north, like I guess for people who don't know New Zealand, in order to really get any good flights, you've got to travel at least 3 hours to get to Auckland to get a flight to go anywhere. So we just didn't really, not much domestic travel at all.
Funny that we're talking about convention, because in front of me I have one of my pictures
Oh my
that
God.
it says on the back that I was age 17, and it was my character trait picture, and I got runner up, and it was a picture of my cat Molly that I used to have
Oh, yeah.
playing in the grass. And I've actually got one of yours here too. It was
That's how do you have this shit?
I
Seriously.
don't know, it's just appeared. Your
Yeah, I used to
character
do a lot
portrait,
of
you were
photography.
14. You were
Hey.
14.
Oh wow. What was it?
The photos come off, but I know it was a
Oh,
picture of our great grandma, which I've got somewhere,
oh
but I
yes, I
can't see
remember
it.
that.
But I
Yes.
remember we used to spend ages going. We had one of those little, not a fancy camera, just a wind up,
Mm,
those real old school cameras where you'd have to wind it and then
yeah.
flick it. And so we would go around like trying to take pictures of people, or like the horses or the cats or whatever we
Mm.
had at the time.
Yeah, I
And
actually had a real love of photography even back then, and I wish I'd invested a bit more because
same, and I
I wouldn't
still
say I
do
was
actually.
like an amazing photographer, but I guess at that time I had a kind of a natural eye for seeing things that might look good as a photo, and I did get some good photos, and yeah, I think I missed out a little bit. I could have pursued that a bit more, and I still love photography now.
Yeah, that was some of
Mm.
the good times. Good times.
It's kind of the perfect way to kind of get into the next chapter, because this was a very kind of late teenage years experience, and at least for me, it did merge into a lot of my early years after leaving, or first year after leaving home. And I guess probably at this point, I'll just explain that we're kind of going to construct this particular chapter over maybe 2 or 3 episodes, and for this first one, we'll just focus on my particular story. Like, as I've mentioned before, this is where Briar and I kind of diverged in paths, because as I left home, we didn't really stay in contact that much, and I don't know a lot of the things that happened to her when she left home, or basically after I left home. We didn't really have much to do with each other. So I guess we'll take it in turns, and we'll kind of interview each other over different episodes. But I guess in terms of leaving home, it was a bit of a drama, not a drama, but I was really excited to leave home, and I had always been really independent and was just always itching to kind of get out into the world, even though I had a concept of what it was like to be somewhere else, but having not really been anywhere else, I didn't know what to expect. But all I know is that as soon as I could start thinking about the idea of leaving home, I was like, shit, I am out of here. And the great thing about the ACE system is that you could, probably the only thing that I am appreciative of is the fact that you could go literally at your own pace. And so I breezed through this system of books and tests and stuff because I was good at reading and I was good at remembering stuff. And it just meant that I could finish school earlier than, say, people of my own age and stage. So I finished at 17, finished with very good scores actually, but meaningless now. But I got like I think it was about 98% in chemistry or something, like something crazy. If you asked me anything about chemistry, I wouldn't have a clue, but because it was all through books and nothing practical. But yeah, I was pretty academic minded, and I was really excited about leaving and going to university. But actually, the process of choosing where to go was a bit stressful for me because I don't remember if we touched on this already, but I really wanted to be a pilot, and I had started doing flying lessons when I was about 11, I think I started, and over a few years was really, really focused on becoming a pilot. And then I kind of had an eye condition that basically made it impossible for me to ever have good enough vision to ever become a commercial pilot. Maybe a private pilot, solo, like just for my own fun or whatever, but it would never be a career. And that was really, really gutting. And I had no idea what I was going to do when I left school after that point. And then I had a friend who ended up going to teachers college, who had gone to our school. This is a member of the close family friends. And so she went off to this teachers college and came back and actually started teaching at the school while I was there. And she kind of encouraged me to give it some thought, and basically knee-jerk reaction was like, okay, I'll just be a teacher then.
Yeah, because where did that even come from? Because I don't ever remember that being something.
Yeah, even now I don't really understand the decision, except for the fact that I just needed something, and I probably was quite impressionable at that time, and would have almost taken anybody's ideas. I knew that I was not like good with my hands, like nothing, like I wouldn't become a builder or anything like that. A trade. I was always academic, so it had to be something in that ilk. I knew I was really interested in history, so I think perhaps in the long run I thought might become a history teacher in the end, or become an academic in the long term. But really, it was probably more about just jumping on this, just go to uni. I knew I wanted to go to uni. I wanted to get out, and I chose the first thing that presented itself. And then there's also the fact that the university that I chose / mum and dad chose was a Christian university, and that was in Tauranga. And Tauranga, I suppose, it's not really that far away from home.
It was 6 hours to get there.
It's 6 hours, yeah. I think 8
and a different
to 10
world
hours by
away
bus.
from what our norm was up in Kirikiri.
Yep. And from our point of view, a big city, it's not even really a city, to be honest. Even all these years later, it still hasn't massively grown in size. But so yeah, went down to Tauranga chose it first. Didn't have to do any kind of entrance exam or anything, which was also a draw card.
Surprisingly, like considering the ACE system we did, that was pretty basic, really, that we were able to still apply for unis because.
Yeah, well, it was accredited by Department of Education.
I know, but that blows my mind because we didn't do exams. We didn't have to study, so to speak, so to go from our curriculum into uni, that's such a big jump. I'm surprised that we were able to.
Well, I had no concept yet of how disadvantaged I was in that respect. That would become clear very quickly, but I'll get to that. But I remember we went down, I think we all went down as a family.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
Yeah, we all went down together, and I mean, it's a bit weird thinking about it now, but one of the first priorities was finding a church. Yeah.
It makes me eye roll.
Yeah. So mum and dad had already done some or heard about a church or something. I don't know how this happened, but it was an Assemblies of God church. So I think that's probably what took them there. And we went and visited, and I remember they talked to the pastors. And I was, oh my God, it's cringy now. It's quite emasculating. I don't know if it felt that way at the time, but it does now. Mm-hmm. The fact that they introduced me to the pastors and told them, what I was doing.
It's kind of patronizing in a way, like, this is our little son. He's just left home. Can you look after him, please?
Oh my God. I do wonder what people would have thought of that. But at that first weekend, they met a family and who conveniently had a room available. And so we all got to go and visit this house and then basically organize a place for me to stay. So I'd be boarding with them and their family. Yeah, I don't remember specifically what, all of those, or what happened in that time, but I just remember doing that. And yeah, it's so weird looking back. When you, it's like I was a child, really, because they were just basically checking up to see if the place was okay and safe for me. And
yeah, it was all a bit weird.
Yeah, it was a bit weird.
And they wanted to, I guess, meet the family to make sure that they were going to look after you too. Again, it was like
they were like a family away from family. That's what
like setting you up to be babysitted, even though you'd left home and you were, essentially an adult.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I just think back about how ill prepared I was for being on my own.
Even just life experience. There was none.
Yeah, so maybe I did kind of need to be babysat a little. I don't know. I can't, because I haven't had it a different way. So maybe I would have, if I'd been on my own like many first year students are, maybe I guess probably would have just figured it out. Struggled, but figured it out. Anyway, so when it eventually came to move down to Tauranga, I remember going to orientation, and the first time where I'd meet all my fellow students. And I guess it's the same way for all young first year uni students. It's just a bit weird because you're all kind of like half young and half at school age, and then you're all excited and I don't know, it was funny. And actually that was the time where I would meet my future partner. Actually. That was an odd experience, which I will talk about in more detail in further episodes. But yeah, that was quite an important moment for me in many ways. But yeah, it was really kind of interesting joining this university. Or I had no idea what university should be like, so I didn't know what to expect. But really, this Christian university was not really a university. It was more of an educational institute. It was very, very Christian, not beat you over the head kind of Christian, but there were prayer meetings and worship things that not everybody was forced to go to, but because most of the people who attended were Christian, it was just natural that they were just expected to join in.
Did you go to those sorts of things, or were you like, nah?
Yeah, I was like, well, the thing is, I was so keen to impress people because I really wanted to make friends. And for the first time ever, or in years, I was with a bunch of people who were the same age and stage. I was a little bit younger than a lot of them, starting at 17, but I was kind of excited. And it was weird. Like, I think I've touched on previously about wanting to kind of fit in and doing, I don't know, the way that I acted was I was very concerned about getting attention. And sometimes that was negative attention. And I didn't know how to interact with people. So I would try and be a clown a lot of the time. And I would just say stupid shit. Or I had this really cringy, annoying thing that I'd run up behind people and like give them like a jab in the ribs or something. Like that kind of stupid,
annoying dickhead thing.
Yeah.
I thought
it would be funny and try and, I don't know, lighten the mood, and really just people got really pissed off. So I just didn't know how to kind of navigate social circles in a way that was normal. Or not, I mean, I don't like to use that word normal, but just in a way that didn't make other people feel uncomfortable. But yeah, first year it was funny because being a Christian kind of thing, there was a big focus on community type activities. And we would often have these kind of sharing times where we would talk about experiences in our lives, and it was all like very feely, emotional stuff. And I just remember a lot of people getting very emotional, talking about their past and things, and which I thought was weird because I was not really into that.
And you probably at the time didn't think you really had anything valid to talk about in terms
No,
of,
no.
emotionally. You're like,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I still remember the kind of first couple of well, at least the first year quite fondly because it was you're a man. I'm a man. I was a man child, and as is very common with guys for for many years, even up into their mid-20s, they just aren't mature. And I know, looking back, that I thought I was mature, but there were so many things about me that were just really immature, and I didn't know how to just figure out social circles and stuff. And it
that's
was
just
also a
lack of
time.
experience, though, wasn't it?
Oh,
Being so
absolutely,
sheltered.
absolutely. And when I was in Kitty Kitty back home, I was pretty quiet and introverted most of the time. And I was just a bit nervous. I had very low confidence, and I did feel that when I went to uni as well. Everyone seemed so confident with themselves and interacting with each other, and that's probably because they all went to big schools and learned how to navigate a big crowd. But I hadn't.
And do you think that a lot of the people that went there were from the area, so they might have, been familiar with it, and maybe other
Well,
people, and
there were definitely locals there for sure, but there were other people from other parts of the country too. Yeah, no, for sure. They were from all over New Zealand. It was like this Bethlehem Tertiary Institute, as it's called now, does have a good reputation for teacher education.
it's probably, is it the only Christian college in New Zealand, like
I
teachers'
think so.
college?
Still, and they focused because they had a good reputation because they focused on education. With at the time they also added in a counselling degree as well. And so, as you can imagine, when you compare that to, say, a big university, although there's more money in a university, all I know is that there was a bit of competition. The way that we talked about the kind of, I think it was Waikato University would be the other major institution. People talked about, well, at least we talked about it. Our university has been quite good. Universities are always very concerned about their reputation, so of course they would talk about that. One other thing I guess I remember from my first semester, first and second semester, was just having crushes all the time. I was just crushing on
get out on
girls.
the real world.
Because I'm out in the world, and then all of a sudden I don't have mum and dad to say whether something is okay or not, and who I should be hanging out with. But I just didn't. I mean, I had no idea what to do with those crushes. And as I said just before about negative attention, I didn't know how to get positive attention. And in the end, I'd be like trying to get into these kind of brother sisterly relationships, which, as you can imagine, just, I don't know, you just get thrown in the friend zone. And because it's the only kind of relationship that I knew how to create with someone of the opposite sex, and I just didn't know how to take it any further, even though I wanted it to. By the time I was brave enough to even think about broaching the idea of being something other than brother and sister, then it was too late. I was already firmly planted in the friend zone. In fact, later on, it just reminded me that one girl that, this is after I was already dating someone, she found out that I'd had a crush on her earlier, and she's like, "Oh, this is like incest." Like, Jesus,
nice.
Punch me, why don't you?
And I remember actually, because I was still living at home at the time, like every 6 weeks, I think it was, we used to come down and visit and stay for the weekend. And it was a big 6-hour drive, and we were all excited to come down, and we would meet your friends and go to your church. And I think that's where we first met your to-be partner, which we didn't know at the time.
Well, and at the same time, you also met one of my crushes, I think. I remember you came for my birthday. You came for my birthday, and it was at Pizza Hut. Oh my God, so sad.
Oh my God,
do you remember this?
Pizza Hut.
Yeah, the Pizza Hut restaurants when they had those, and oh my God, it was so sad because I think I invited a bunch of people, and it was just my future partner at the time, who I don't think I could. I think she was the one person I could guarantee would turn up, because I knew
Yes.
she was crushing on me at that time. And then people I was crushing
Basically a
on
stalker.
didn't show up for some reason. And then my other friend that I'd made, he was just unreliable. And so it was just a very small gathering of family and
And your future wife.
someone who crushed on me who I didn't want to return the crush. Yeah, a bit cringy. Oh my God, Pizza Hut. So lame.
It's like 11-year-olds party. Yay,
Yeah,
Pizza Hut.
yeah, just was missing the hat and candles.
Where you get unlimited amounts of food and you go crazy
Yeah.
with the ice cream machine.
I guess the big part of my life at the time that was happening concurrently with first time at uni was joining this big church that would actually turn into becoming quite a pivotal time in terms of growing in church and kind of growing in quote unquote the faith and kind of experiencing big church life. And so when I joined this Assemblies of God church, it was really exciting because it was, I think at that time, maybe about 500-ish people.
And they were all quite young, weren't they? You know, young, vibrant, excitable,
big
passionate
push
people.
on the youth and investing in youth. And it was really exciting to be a part of a church that did exciting activities and had stuff that was purposely designed for the youth to have a good time. And we had met some of these people before when they'd come around and visited the church, our home church. And so I think that was probably one of the reasons why I had chosen to attend this church. But yeah, it was like the music was great and the people seemed really nice and friendly.
But I feel like that church, from memory, they were kind of like your poster church. You know, they were all young, good-looking people.
Yeah.
Which made you want to be a part of it because it was, they were all sexy young people. It was fun. You know, the music was good. It was vibing. And as a young person,
that was
like,
totally their appeal, and they really were kind of pulling people in because of that, especially young people. And it's no surprise that I was just and this is they aspirational. Okay, so they were an aspirational church. They were trying to grow, not necessarily purely for the sake of growing, but they were aspiring to be a large church that had a large impact. And they had very close links with Hillsong in Australia, and that was very much their model of how they did church. So we sang a lot of Hillsong music, which, for those who don't know, Hillsong, at least back then, was very influential in the church world, and they had a big pull on young people especially, and it was all about having music that was exciting and kind of closer to more secular styles of music, but
relatable, maybe, you know,
more relatable to a
younger
crowd. And traditionally, music had been quite stilted and boring, let's be honest, and there hadn't really been any growth in Christian music probably for about 10 years in terms of anything exciting. And so we're in the early 2000s. That was when things started to get really exciting in terms of church life. And so I was pulled into that, and it was amazing. The every week I would get really excited about going to church and then hanging out with the young people, and I made some friends there pretty quickly. It was interesting looking back, the people that I ended up making friends with, because they weren't necessarily the people who were in at least initially in the quote unquote cool crowd, because I was not confident. I was not cool. I was so far from cool in that first year. Like the clothes I wore, the way that I presented myself, massive lack of confidence, just a little bit awkward, not just like in a crowd because I was, but also just the way that I literally looked was awkward. And so I definitely couldn't fit in with all those good looking cool people. So I anyway ended up with this other crowd who were probably the same as me, a little bit awkward, and great people, amazing people, and I'm so grateful for the fact that they pulled me in. But yeah, just we were all kind of on the fridge, and I think over the years at this particular church, it became apparent that there was very much a difference between the cool crowd and the not cool crowds, and that's something that we can get into in another time. But it is very much a feature of these kind of big aspirational churches that there is definitely a separation between the cool and the uncool, the in crowd and the out. But that's quite a complex conversation to get into. But anyway, I had a great time, and I got involved in being a youth leader for the first time for intermediate youth, and that was amazing because it was all games and big production value, trying to do it like for a really good cause, like working with at-risk youth, and just a lot of fun. Such a lot of fun doing these amazing games in the church. And so I'm doing this, I've got these two different parallel lives going on where I am in this church community trying to kind of get involved with things. I got involved in music pretty quickly, and then at uni was kind of struggling. I was really struggling at uni. And this is where I guess I can talk about the disadvantage of our school system. I had no fucking idea how to do anything, like anything. I got my first essay assignment. I was like, so what my uni was, it was quite small for a university, but what was really great about it is that we had really close relationships with the lecturers because the class sizes were quite small, and they worked quite closely with us, especially in that first semester, to try and help us figure out how to do all these assignments and things. And I remember taking a first draft and getting it sent back because it was just so bad. Like, I had no idea how to write.
And that's what I mean, how the ACE system just didn't prepare us for uni at all. So I'm surprised that it was accredited and that you could go from our system to, because it didn't give you the confidence to do things like, the essays and.
Yeah. I mean, to give you some sense of how big the difference was at school, I think I wrote one essay, and I did one speech, which I never gave. It got cancelled for some reason. Yeah. And one essay, which didn't really get graded as an essay. It was just like, I don't know, I can't even remember what it was about, but I couldn't have been more unprepared. And whilst everybody struggles with assignments in first year of uni, most people have had some practice writing because that's what you do at school. They prepare you for university. Nothing, nada. And I, being the perfectionist that I was, really, really struggled I got quite depressed, and like first semester exams, walked out, didn't even finish because I was so overwhelmed by the pressure of having to perform at something that I'd always been bad under pressure, but then also under pressure to write something when I didn't know how to write. Like, it was awful.
And as we've discussed before in the ATE system, it's kind of all self-taught. So you read the thing on the left-hand side of your page and it explains, like in English specifically, how to, say, write a professional letter. Or I do remember myself doing some essays, but they wouldn't be what people who went to maybe a public school would have considered an essay. It might have been like, so long, but not something that you'd stand up in front of a class and have to read. Like, it was like just writing a letter to someone, like a page long. It definitely wasn't an essay on a focused topic like you'd get it at uni.
Yeah, so I failed my first subject. It was, I can't remember what it was, but it was something like, it was a really in-depth subject on psychology, I think. It's like maybe youth psychology or something like that. And whilst I found it really interesting, I just didn't know how to communicate or disseminate any of the ideas that were presented, and failed big time. Well, I mean, how could you pass when you walk out of the exams? And I don't remember what happened, but I definitely had to redo it. Second semester was better than the first because like people helped me. I remember a lot of last minute rush for quite a few of my subjects, where in my friends that I'd made had, gather around and help me send in these assignments last minute, and I think a lot of people felt sorry for me.
I do remember at this time because Mum and Dad were, I think, quite concerned about you. So I know we did extra trips down to come and support or offer moral support.
Yeah, which I don't think I really appreciated at the time.
And
'Cause it's not
neither
what
of
I
our
wanted.
parents, it's not like either of our parents were academic, so to speak, so they weren't actually able to help. I think they just thought, because you were so down about it, that, would come down and, I don't know, I'm not sure what they thought,
Yeah.
how that was going to go.
Well, I guess the one thing that we can appreciate about Mum and Dad is that they are very much, they do want to do something.
Mm.
And for them, it's because what would help for them is just someone being there, right? And
Yeah.
I'm very different from that. I didn't need someone to be there. I needed real practical tools.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I learned those practical tools through hard work and the help of other people who were actually in the same situation that I was actually able to get anywhere. But when, I'd left home as fast as I could to get away from this kind of overwhelming presence, the feeling of being watched and tightly held onto, and to have the constant reminder of that and them coming down.
Yeah.
The other thing is that a lot of my uni friends had help from home, like financial help and stuff. I did not, and I'm interested to hear what this would be like for you when we come around to talking about your story. But for me, I struggled in this first year financially because Mum and Dad didn't want to give me any money, or I don't know. They didn't really explain to me why they came to that decision. I didn't think about it at the time because I didn't know what it would have been like. But a lot of other people had financial support from home, and basically I'm still feeling the pain of this now, because what happened in that first year is that, so I had a student loan, and then because I had no money coming in, I also took on extra student debt. So there was you could get a weekly allowance.
Yeah.
A weekly allowance, and well, it's not an allowance, it's a part of the loan. And then on top of that, once a semester, you could get course-related costs as well, and I would take that. And because I was first time out of home, I didn't know anything about being responsible with money.
Yeah, you just spend it, eh?
I don't think I was a big spender, but because it wasn't a lot of money, I didn't know how to save money. I just had never been in that situation before. So basically I was just spending money that wasn't mine.
Another thing, we didn't get any practical experience about any of that stuff, before leaving home.
Because Mum and Dad they did give us a bit of an allowance when we were at home, but
it wasn't much though.
It wasn't much, yeah. So basically in that whole first year, I was just landing myself a massive amount of debt, and I wasn't really aware of it until much later. I'm still paying off that loan. So my second student experience, which is much further in the future, I learned a lot of lessons from this first time around, and did my second student experience a lot better than this one. Got it all paid off and stuff, but now I'm still paying off this loan because it got so, over the 3-4 years I was there, it got really big. So yeah, really, really unprepared for my first year away from home. And I had a lot of lows, if I'm honest, a lot of lows, because I was really lonely in that first year. I did make some friends, but at the same time, because a lot of those people they were from Tauranga, I didn't know many people who came from other parts of the country, and so I don't think anyone really fully understood what it was like to be somewhere completely new. And yeah, it was a real struggle of figuring out my identity, figuring out a new city, figuring out a new way of life, new church, new university, new systems, new processes, everything was new. And there was a time where I was asked to leave that first house that I had gone and visited with Mum and Dad and you, because I just didn't fit in there. I didn't know how to process living with these people, and they probably vice versa. They didn't know how to process having me in their space as well.
Because didn't they have, was it 3 kids?
Yeah,
Like
so
like teenage kids, and weren't
yeah,
they?
one of them was just really annoying, and
Yeah, he
he
bullied
was a bit of
you.
a dick. He would do it. He would actually purposely try and piss me off because he thought it was a game, but I did not obviously think it was a game.
And then
And
I remember embarrassingly mum and dad coming down again to the rescue
yeah,
to speak to the parents,
yeah,
about the bullying situation, but it just didn't work out.
yeah. Anyway, I mean, I'm glad I actually got on with them much better later on. But in that first year, it was really weird. So I left them and ended up at a different house with a young family, a couple and their two young kids, and that was really nice. It was also a boarding situation. I was a bit of in a weird stage then though, because I was feeling quite down. I'd spent a lot of time in my room or on the computer late at night. Uh, when I first discovered porn. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Well, it was probably your first, because we didn't have internet at home
No,
either, so that was probably the
no,
first
and
time you're like,
and
"Ooh,
had
what's
no
this?
idea how to cover my
Ooh."
tracks. So there was, I ended up getting
You
they didn't
didn't
ask me to
clean your
leave, but
history.
it was a situation that came to an end perhaps prematurely, and that maybe that had something to do with it. Who knows?
You'll never know.
Yeah, because from there I moved into a flat with some of the friends that I'd made at church. That was great, and this is probably when things started to really improve. Is when I started flatting, and that was when I started to really.
You probably didn't feel like you're being watched all the time too by these babysitters. You could actually be free and relax a bit.
Yeah, I started to feel like an actual adult, and I was trying to kind of like starting to relax into being the person that I wanted to be. Still very impressionable, still really inexperienced, but at least I had, my own room and my own kind of life. I couldn't drive at that stage. In fact, I didn't learn to drive until I was
Did you not have your license?
no, oh, I had my learner's license, but I never drove. I didn't start driving until I was about 20, I think.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, so the first couple of years in Tauranga, I didn't drive. I got driven everywhere, which really impacted my independence, as you can imagine.
And probably your friends are just like, oh, I have to go pick up Kieran.
Well, I mean, I hated putting people out, but I just ended up being around the same people all the time because I knew they could take me places. But yeah, severely changed my experience when I finally learned how to drive. But yeah, so flatting was a lot of fun, and then I moved from one flat into another one. A couple of guys, so that who weren't church people, so that this was also like even further down the path of independence, learning how to live a life with people who weren't really into church or church life. I would say that I was not. Had Christianity and religion and a moral code so ingrained in me that I didn't feel the pull to go anywhere else. So I didn't go into any kind of rebellious stage or anything. But it was just nice to go somewhere where I don't know, probably didn't think about it so much at the time, but there was no real pressure. I didn't feel like I needed to take them to church or anything. It was just fun. I had some good times in that flat. It was awful. The flat I was in was horrible. It was in kind of like surrounded by trees, so it was really cold and damp and bloody awful. There was mold and all sorts of shit. But I had a drum kit set up there, and these two guys I studied with, they were in my class, and so we used to hang out all the time and play music together. One of the guys would play guitar because I had a guitar there as well, and one of the guys, he would go out and have big nights and come back, hungover in the morning, and we'd have great fun trying to wake him up early in the morning for class. And yeah, it was
again, your first exposure to that kind of thing too.
Yeah. I mean, you know about these things growing up, but you don't actually see them in real life when you're in such an isolated community.
Had never seen a drunk person before.
No, but I don't remember. Maybe I definitely would have seen him drunk. I just didn't think about it much at the time. But yeah, flatting, that first year of flatting was a really good experience for me, and I had a lot of fun. And it was weird, like going back to, mum and dad coming down to visit. They were obviously empty nesting. They really wanted to hold on to those connections, but I didn't really feel any connection to home. And in that first year, I think I maybe visited twice Went home twice, and it was really strange, a very strange feeling. It was like being there but not being there, being a stranger. Everyone seeing me exactly the way as I had been when I left, and then
But nothing else has changed there.
yeah, and it's a small town. Things don't really change much in small towns, especially the people. And when I went back and visited the church, I just felt like I was probably a bit of a dick, to be honest, because I just thought I was too good for it. And it was like going back in time to, now I was the educated guy, and now that I left town, why would I ever want to go back?
I definitely have memories of you not really wanting to be there. When mum and dad were like, "Are you going to come home for Christmas?" And you're sort of like, you'd rather spend it with your friends.
Yeah, and I remember going back and visiting the girl that I was that had that big crush on before I had left, for like the couple of years before I left home, and going back and seeing her and the family. And that's just been an awkward experience, because now I felt like I had so much more. I don't know. It was different. It's different when, you see those people that you had done experienced life with. So much of my life is with these particular people, and then coming back and seeing things in a different light. It's not as if those feelings had just vanished. It was just, you see people differently, and being the kind of probably a little bit up myself at the time, a little bit pretentious, which is odd because in Tauranga I was the bottom of the social heap, so to speak. But then going back home and kind of trying to act like I was at the top. Probably not an unusual experience for people who go away to university in other towns, but yeah, it was just really strange.
Yeah. I do remember when you'd come back sometimes. I know we weren't friends when you were living at home, but when you left, I don't know, it was like the space that we needed. We weren't, getting under each other's skin all the time. And I probably could take your comics and read them without you being there and knowing, and I could put them back and you were none the wiser. But I remember being excited when you were coming home to find out all your news. And that it must have been the first year. I don't really remember you coming back much, but I remember because it was such a long journey. You must have driven up, and you'd arrive at like midnight, and I'd stay up and wait for you to get back, and we'd have big long chats. And
because I did remember we started texting at that time, especially in that first semester.
Because I got my first phone when I was 15, so that would probably be about right for you when you left. You would have been 17.
Yeah.
So yeah, our sort of relationship changed then, but then it must have dropped off again at some point.
I think probably after I started dating, I would imagine, because I remember we talked about that leading up to it.
Yes.
But after that, probably not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that in your first year? Must have been.
That was, first year. So I started dating this person, I think it must have been in mid-second semester, so kind of before the end of the first year.
Still quite early on.
Yeah, just before the long break, actually, I remember now. Yeah, so, I mean, that is a very interesting story that we will need to focus more on.
But you used to come home with the friends that you'd made too. You'd bring them up north.
Did I?
And yes, because this specific person became my first boyfriend. Again, it was my first experience.
Yes.
And you and
well, I mean, we're going to talk about this in much more detail in the next episode.
Set me up. You set me up. This person.
Jesus, how did I forget that?
Yeah, how?
It was a long road. We did a road trip, didn't we?
Yes, but that wasn't the only person you brought home with you to sort of meet us. And I don't know if that's when we'd go. It must have been the summer holidays or something, and we'd go camping. And
that was a bit later on, but yeah,
that's my memory of it.
I guess probably this is probably the best time to probably draw this particular episode to a close, because I feel like I've been prattling on, doing a monologue for long enough. But I mean, there are more things to share which will perhaps pop up in the coming episodes. But I mean, the next one, I guess we'll focus more on your side of the story and your experiences, which many I don't. I've heard parts of, but not in consecutive order. So that'd be really interesting to dive into that. But I guess we'll finish off for now, and then we'll come back and revisit Briar's first year away from home. And thanks for sticking it out with us. And I hope you haven't got bored of my voice. I mean, if you've got bored of my voice, you wouldn't have made it this long anyway. But yeah, thanks. And we will catch you on the next episode of This Is Our Story. Thank you.
Catch soon.